The flames licked higher along the wooden walls of the shack as Tabitha Norwood's desperate screams pierced the night air, barely audible over the roaring inferno that threatened to consume her. She pounded against the locked door, the iron bolt on the outside refusing to budge no matter how frantically she threw her weight against the splintering wood. Smoke filled her lungs, and tears streamed down her soot-stained face as she realized with mounting terror that this abandoned homestead on the outskirts of Copper Creek might become her final resting place. Wyoming Territory, 1878, the night had begun like any other for Tabitha. At 22 years old, she had been working at Millie's boarding house in Copper Creek for nearly 3 years, ever since her father had passed away and left her with nothing but debts and the clothes on her back. She had been returning from delivering fresh linens to the doctor's office when 3 men had intercepted her on the darkened street. Their faces were covered with bandanas, but she recognized the voice of one Jeremiah Dawson, the ruthless son of the territory's wealthiest cattle baron. "Looks like we caught ourselves a pretty little thing," he had sneered, while his companions had grabbed her arms. She had fought, of course, kicking and screaming until something hard connected with the back of her head, plunging her world into darkness. She had awakened in this shack, miles from town, with her hands bound and the door securely locked from the outside. Jeremiah had made his intentions clear before departing. She would stay here until she agreed to his proposal. He had been pursuing her for months, his advances growing increasingly aggressive despite her firm rejections. This time he wouldn't take no for an answer, but something had gone terribly wrong. The oil lamp they had left had toppled when she finally managed to free her hands, and within moments, the dry timber of the abandoned shack had caught fire. Now, as smoke filled the single room and the heat became unbearable, Tabitha knew she had only minutes left. Help. She screamed again, her voice growing hoarse. "Somebody please help me." Vaughn Keller urged his horse faster through the darkness, the smell of smoke growing stronger with each passing second. He had been tracking rustlers for 2 days, following them from his small ranch near the Montana border into Wyoming Territory. The glow on the horizon had caught his attention, drawing him away from the trail and toward what appeared to be a burning building in the distance. At 28, Vaughn had seen his share of tragedy. Orphaned during the war and raised by a cavalry sergeant who had found him half-starved in the ruins of his family's Tennessee farm, he had grown into a man who understood that sometimes the difference between life and death was simply being in the right place at the right time. As his horse crested the final ridge, he saw the small shack engulfed in flames and heard a sound that sent a chill down his spine despite the heat radiating from the burning structure. Someone was inside, screaming for help. Without hesitation, Vaughn leaped from his horse and sprinted toward the burning building. The heat was intense, forcing him to shield his face with his arm as he approached. The screams had grown weaker, but he could still hear them, punctuated by desperate coughing. "Hold on." He shouted, circling the shack to find the entrance. When he reached the door, he discovered the iron bolt securing it from the outside. Someone had deliberately trapped whoever was inside. With a surge of fury, he threw his weight against the door. The wood creaked but held firm. Backing up, he launched himself forward again, feeling the impact jar through his shoulder. On the third attempt, the wood around the hinges splintered, and the door gave way. A wall of heat and smoke hit him like a physical blow. Dropping to his knees where the air was clearer, he crawled into the inferno. Through the thick smoke, he saw a figure collapsed on the floor near the center of the room, motionless except for weak coughing. Vaughn didn't hesitate. He scrambled forward, reached the prone figure, and discovered it was a young woman. Her dress was singed, her face blackened with soot, but she was alive. Gathering her in his arms, he staggered to his feet and turned back toward the door just as a burning beam crashed down behind them. The fresh night air hit them both as he carried her clear of the shack, not stopping until they reached a safe distance. Only then did he gently lay her down on the cool grass, quickly checking her for injuries as the building continued to burn behind them, lighting the night sky with angry orange flames. "Miss, can you hear me?" he asked, supporting her head as she coughed violently, expelling smoke from her lungs. Tabitha's eyes fluttered open, struggling to focus on the face above her. For a moment, she thought she might be dreaming or perhaps she had died, and this was her first glimpse of the afterlife. But the strong arms supporting her felt real, as did the burning in her lungs and the cool night air on her skin. "You're safe now," the stranger said, his voice deep and reassuring. "Just breathe." She tried to speak but dissolved into another fit of coughing. When it finally subsided, she managed to whisper, "Thank you," before darkness claimed her once more. Vaughn watched with concern as the young woman lost consciousness again. Her breathing was labored but steady, a good sign. The nearest town was at least 2 hours' ride, but he couldn't leave her out here, especially not when someone had deliberately locked her in that shack. Whoever had done this might return. He fashioned a makeshift bed of blankets from his saddlebags, made her as comfortable as possible, and built a small fire at a safe distance from the still burning shack. Throughout the night, he tended to her, wiping the soot from her face with a damp bandana and ensuring she was breathing properly. It was near dawn when she stirred again. This time her eyes opened fully, revealing a striking green color that caught Vaughn by surprise. "Where am I?" she asked, her voice raspy from smoke and screaming. "About 15 miles northeast of Copper Creek, I'd reckon," he replied. "I'm Vaughn Keller. I found you trapped in that shack." Memory flooded back and Tabitha struggled to sit up. "Jeremiah," she gasped. "He'll come back, he said he would." Vaughn gently pressed her back down. "Easy now, nobody's coming near you while I'm here. Who's Jeremiah and why did he lock you in that shack?" Tabitha hesitated, then decided that the man who had saved her life deserved the truth. "Jeremiah Dawson. His father owns half the valley. He's been pursuing me for months. I've refused him, and he doesn't take rejection well." Vaughn's expression hardened. He had heard of the Dawsons. Their reputation for ruthlessness extended even to the northern territories where his small ranch was located. "He kidnapped you and left you to die?" he asked, his voice controlled but with an undercurrent of anger. "He didn't mean for the fire," Tabitha clarified, though it hardly mattered. "He was trying to force me to agree to marry him. The lamp fell when I was trying to free my hands." Vaughn nodded grimly. "Can you travel? We should get you to a doctor and then to the sheriff." Tabitha's laugh was bitter. "Sheriff Jenkins, he's in Dawson's pocket. He won't do anything." "Then we'll find someone who will," Vaughn said with determination. "But first we need to get you proper care. Do you have family in Copper Creek?" She shook her head. "No family. I work at Millie's boarding house. Millie will be worried sick by now." The sun was beginning to rise, casting long shadows across the grassland. The shack had burned down to smoldering embers, leaving little more than a blackened frame against the brightening sky. "Think you can ride?" Vaughn asked, offering her water from his canteen. Tabitha took a small sip, savoring the coolness against her raw throat. "I believe so. I grew up on a small farm. I've been riding since before I could walk." With careful movements, Vaughn helped her to her feet. She swayed slightly, and he steadied her with a strong hand at her elbow. For a moment their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them, a connection forged in the crucible of survival. "Thank you," she said again, her voice stronger now, "for saving my life." Vaughn simply nodded, suddenly aware of how close they were standing. He cleared his throat and stepped back. "We should get moving before it gets too hot." He helped her onto his horse, then mounted behind her. With one arm securely around her waist to keep her steady, he urged the horse forward, leaving the remains of the shack behind them. As they rode, Tabitha learned that Vaughn had come to the territory 3 years earlier, establishing a modest ranch near the Montana border. He was tracking rustlers who had stolen several of his best horses when he spotted the burning shack. "Seems like fate," she remarked, her voice still raspy but growing stronger. "I don't put much stock in fate," Vaughn replied, "but I'm glad I was passing by when I was." Tabitha fell silent, acutely aware of his arm around her waist and the solid presence of his chest against her back. Despite the circumstances, she felt safer than she had in years. When they reached Copper Creek shortly after midday, the town was buzzing with activity. Vaughn helped Tabitha down from his horse outside Millie's boarding house, supporting her as she stood on unsteady legs. The door burst open before they reached it, and a plump, gray-haired woman rushed out, her face a mask of concern that transformed into relief when she saw Tabitha. "Good heavens, child, where have you been? I've been worried sick." She embraced Tabitha fiercely, then pulled back to examine her soot-stained appearance. "What in the world happened to you?" "It's a long story, Millie," Tabitha said wearily. "This is Vaughn Keller. He saved my life." Millie turned to Vaughn, her expression softening. "Then you'd better come in, Mr. Keller. Any man who saves our Tabitha is welcome under my roof." Inside, Tabitha was quickly whisked away to be tended to by Millie and the town doctor, who was summoned immediately. Vaughn found himself seated at Millie's kitchen table, a cup of strong coffee and a plate of food before him. "She'll be all right," Millie assured him as she bustled around the kitchen. "Our Tabitha is stronger than she looks." "I don't doubt it," Vaughn replied, thinking of how she had survived the ordeal. "She mentioned a man named Jeremiah Dawson, said he was behind what happened." Millie's expression darkened. "That no-good scoundrel, been hounding her for months. His father thinks his money means his boy can have whatever or whoever he wants. The sheriff won't help, Sheriff Jenkins," Millie scoffed. "He'd sooner arrest me for serving bad coffee than cross the Dawsons." Vaughn nodded thoughtfully, sipping his coffee. "How long has Tabitha lived here?" "Coming on 3 years now. Her father died, left her nothing but debts. She came here looking for work, and I took her in. Hardest worker I've ever seen, and sweet as can be." Millie studied him with shrewd eyes. "You planning on staying around, Mr. Keller?" The question caught him off guard. "I need to report the rustlers I was tracking, and then I should get back to my ranch." Was all Millie said, but her expression suggested she had more on her mind. The doctor emerged from Tabitha's room an hour later, his expression reassuring. "She'll recover fully," he told them. The smoke inhalation wasn't severe enough to cause permanent damage. She needs rest and plenty of fluids. Vaughn felt relief wash over him. "May I see her?" The doctor nodded. "Briefly, she needs her rest." Tabitha was propped up in bed, her face cleaned of soot and her hair brushed into smooth waves that cascaded over her shoulders. She looked pale but alert, her green eyes brightening when Vaughn entered. "The doctor says you'll make a full recovery," he said, standing awkwardly at the foot of her bed. "Thanks to you," she replied. "I never properly introduced myself. I'm Tabitha Norwood. Pleased to meet you properly, Miss Norwood." He shifted his weight, suddenly uncomfortable with the formality between them after all they had shared. "Please call me Tabitha." She hesitated, then added, "Will you be staying in town long?" "I need to report the rustlers to the territorial marshal," he explained. "And then I should get back to my ranch." Disappointment flickered across her face, quickly masked. "Of course, you must have responsibilities." An awkward silence fell between them. Finally, Vaughn said, "I'll check on you before I leave town." Her smile was genuine but tinged with sadness. "I would like that." Vaughn left her to rest, his thoughts in turmoil. Something about Tabitha Norwood had gotten under his skin in a way no woman ever had before, but his life was up north and hers was here. Besides, she had just survived a traumatic ordeal. The last thing she needed was him complicating her life further. The following morning, Vaughn made his report to the territorial marshal, who happened to be passing through town. The marshal was far more interested in Vaughn's account of Tabitha's kidnapping than the rustlers. "Dawson's boy has been pushing the limits of the law for years," the marshal said grimly. "But kidnapping and attempted murder, that crosses the line. I'll be paying a visit to the Dawson ranch today." "What about Sheriff Jenkins?" Vaughn asked. "Jenkins answers to me whether he likes it or not," the marshal replied with a hard smile. "I've been looking for an excuse to clean up this county for a while now." Satisfied that justice would be pursued, Vaughn returned to Millie's to check on Tabitha. He found her in the garden behind the boarding house, sitting on a bench in the shade of an apple tree. She looked better today, some color having returned to her cheeks. "The marshal is going to arrest Jeremiah," he told her as he sat beside her. "He takes kidnapping very seriously." Relief washed over her face. "I was afraid nothing would be done. The law still means something in the territory, even if some people forget it." He hesitated, then added, "I'll be heading back to my ranch tomorrow." She nodded, looking down at her hands folded in her lap. "I understand. You have a life to get back to." "Tabitha," he said softly, causing her to look up at him. "I can't stop thinking about what might have happened if I hadn't seen that fire." "But you did," she replied, "and I'm alive because of you. I'd like to write to you if that would be all right." Her smile was like the sun emerging from behind clouds. "I'd like that very much." That evening, Jeremiah Dawson was brought into town in shackles, his face a mask of fury as the marshal led him to the jailhouse. The elder Dawson rode in an hour later, demanding his son's release, only to be met with the marshal's unwavering stance. "Your money doesn't outweigh the law, Dawson," the marshal declared loudly enough for half the town to hear. "Your boy tried to kill an innocent woman, and he'll stand trial for it." The incident became the talk of Copper Creek, with many townsfolk stopping by Millis to express their support for Tabitha. Through it all, Vaughn remained at her side, a steady presence that both comforted and confused her. Their connection was undeniable, yet temporary, or so she believed. On the morning Vaughn was to depart, Tabitha walked with him to the town livery where his horse was stabled. Neither spoke until they reached the hitching post outside. "Thank you again," she said, breaking the silence. "For everything." Vaughn looked down at her, memorizing every detail of her face. "I've been thinking," he said slowly. "My ranch is a day's ride from here, not so far that I couldn't come to town every few weeks." Hope blossomed in her chest. "What are you saying, Vaughn?" "I'm saying that I'd like to court you properly, Tabitha Norwood, if you'll allow it." Her heart soared at his words. "I would like that very much." He smiled then, a rare, full smile that transformed his rugged features. "Then I'll be back in 2 weeks' time." True to his word, Vaughn returned to Copper Creek exactly 2 weeks later. Tabitha was waiting for him on the porch of Millie's boarding house, her face lighting up when she saw him riding down the main street. Their courtship proceeded at a measured pace over the following months. Vaughn made the journey to Copper Creek every 2 weeks without fail, staying for 2 or 3 days each time. They took walks around town, had picnics by the creek, and spent evenings on Millie's porch swing, talking until the stars came out. Tabitha learned that beneath Vaughn's quiet exterior was a man of deep principles and gentle humor. He had served briefly in the army after being raised by the cavalry sergeant, but found he preferred the solitude of ranch life to military discipline. He had worked on various ranches across the West before saving enough to purchase his own small spread. Vaughn, in turn, discovered Tabitha's strength and resilience. The daughter of a farmer who had lost everything in a drought, she had learned early on to adapt to hardship. Despite the challenges she had faced, she maintained a warmth and optimism that drew people to her. As autumn painted the surrounding hills in brilliant hues of gold and crimson, Jeremiah Dawson's trial was held in the territorial capital. Tabitha traveled there to testify with Vaughn at her side. Her testimony was clear and unwavering, and when combined with the evidence of the burned shack in Vaughn's account, it was more than enough. Jeremiah was sentenced to 10 years in the territorial prison. "It's over," Vaughn said as they left the courthouse. "He can't hurt you anymore." Tabitha took his hand, squeezing it gently. "I stopped being afraid of him the moment you carried me out of that shack." The words hung between them, a reminder of how their lives had intersected in that moment of crisis. As they rode back to Copper Creek together, something shifted in their relationship. The cautious dance of courtship gave way to a deeper understanding and affection. Winter came early that year, blanketing the territory in snow and making travel between Vaughn's ranch and Copper Creek increasingly difficult. After being snowed in at Millie's for nearly a week in December, Vaughn knew he had a decision to make. They sat before the fire in Millie's parlor on his last evening before attempting the journey back to his ranch, the room empty save for the two of them. Millie had tactfully retired early, giving them rare privacy. "I hate the thought of not seeing you until the spring thaws," Tabitha admitted, watching the flames dance in the hearth. Vaughn took her hand, his expression serious. "I've been thinking about us," her heart quickened. "Oh. I never thought I'd find someone who could make me reconsider my solitary life," he said quietly. "But you've changed everything, Tabitha." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small object wrapped in a handkerchief. Carefully unfolding it, he revealed a simple gold ring with a small, perfect pearl. "It was my mother's," he explained. "The only thing I have left of her. I've carried it with me all these years, waiting for the right person to give it to." Tabitha's breath caught in her throat as he slid from his chair to one knee before her. "Tabitha Norwood, I love you more than I ever thought possible. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Tears welled in her eyes as she nodded, too overwhelmed for words at first. Yes, she finally managed. Yes, Vaughn, I will marry you. He slipped the ring onto her finger where it fit perfectly, as though it had been made for her. When he kissed her, it was with a tenderness that spoke of all the days to come, days they would face together. They were married 2 weeks later in Copper Creek's small church, with Millie beaming from the front pew and half the town in attendance. The territorial marshal made a special trip to be there, standing as Vaughn's best man. "Never seen a man ride through a blizzard to propose before," the marshal commented during the small reception at Millie's. "That's when I knew you were serious." Vaughn couldn't take his eyes off his bride. "Best decision I ever made was riding toward that fire that night." As winter deepened, Tabitha moved to Vaughn's ranch, bringing with her a warmth that transformed the simple cabin into a home. They worked side by side, weathering the harsh winter together. In the evenings, they would sit before the fire, planning for the future, expanding the ranch, building a larger house, and perhaps one day filling it with children. Spring arrived with renewed promise. The land awakened from its winter slumber, and with it, their dreams began to take root. Vaughn's herd increased, and Tabitha started a vegetable garden that soon flourished under her care. In late summer, a year after the night of the fire, Tabitha shared news that filled Vaughn with joy: they would be welcoming a child in the winter. As her belly grew round with new life, Vaughn built an addition to their cabin, creating a nursery filled with furniture he crafted with his own hands. On a cold January night, their daughter came into the world, healthy and strong, with her mother's green eyes and her father's determined expression. They named her Hope, a testament to the future they had found together. As Vaughn held his infant daughter while Tabitha rested, he thought back to that night when fate or providence had led him to a burning shack where a remarkable woman fought for her life. How close he had come to losing something he hadn't even known he was searching for. 5 years passed, bringing prosperity to their ranch and joy to their growing family. Hope was joined by a brother, Samuel, and the larger house Vaughn had promised was finally completed, standing proudly on a hill overlooking their expanding property. On the anniversary of the night they first met, Vaughn and Tabitha made a tradition of sitting on their porch after the children were asleep, watching the stars and reflecting on how far they had come. "Do you ever think about how different our lives might have been if you hadn't seen that fire?" Tabitha asked, her head resting on his shoulder. Vaughn's arm tightened around her. "I try not to. The thought of never knowing you, never having our children." He shook his head. "Some things are just meant to be, I suppose. So you do believe in fate now?" She teased, looking up at him with the same green eyes that had captured his heart years ago. "I believe in us," he replied simply. "Everything else follows from that." In the quiet of the evening, with the sounds of their ranch settling around them and the future stretching bright before them, they shared a kiss that held all the promise of that first desperate rescue, a reminder that sometimes the greatest journeys begin in the darkest moments, and that love, once kindled, burns with a flame that nothing can extinguish. As the years continued to pass, their ranch flourished into one of the most respected in the territory. Vaughn's fair business practices and Tabitha's warm hospitality made their home a gathering place for friends and neighbors. Their children grew strong and capable, learning the value of hard work and compassion from parents who never took their happiness for granted. When Hope turned 16, Tabitha took her daughter to the site where the shack had once stood. Though nothing remained but a few charred timbers mostly reclaimed by the earth, it was important to Tabitha that her daughter understand the story of her parents' beginning. "This is where your father saved my life," she told Hope, standing in the summer grass that had long since covered the ashes. "And in doing so, he saved yours before you were even a thought in our minds." Hope, nearly a woman now with her father's quiet strength and her mother's compassionate heart, looked around the peaceful meadow, trying to imagine the night of fear and fire that had brought her parents together. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if he hadn't come along?" she asked. Tabitha smiled, tucking a strand of silver-streaked hair behind her ear. "Your father says some things are just meant to be. I believe he's right." That evening, as they had for 20 years, Vaughn and Tabitha sat together on their porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in colors that reminded them both of fire, not of destruction, but of the passion that had carried them through 2 decades together. 20 years, Vaughn marveled, his hand finding hers as naturally as breathing. Sometimes it feels like yesterday that I carried you out of that burning shack. And sometimes it feels like I've loved you forever. Tabitha replied, leaning against the strong shoulder that had been her support through all the joys and trials of their shared life. As darkness settled over their land and the first stars appeared in the velvet sky, they sat in comfortable silence. Two people who had found in each other not just love, but home, a place of safety and belonging that had been forged in fire and tempered by time, growing only stronger with each passing year.